This is the second module for Cloud Security Essentials training courses. And as we mentioned before, that the training courses, it will be split into 4 modules. Module 1, which we covered already for architecture concepts and design requirements. We took long time in this module because this module covers a lot of concepts and basics for the IT security and cloud security as well. I think the other 4 modules it will be easy because we will go through the security issues related to some topics as the data, infrastructure, applications, security operations, and so on. This module, it will concern about the cloud data security, and now we will concentrate on the data itself. We will concentrate on the data itself. We will have 3 topics for the design and apply data security strategies, data protection, and security concepts related to the cloud computing. In the first module for design and apply data security strategies, we will have some very important concepts, and we will try to go through each one of them. First of all, as you remember, we mentioned that the characteristics of the cloud service provider is based on the multi-tenancy, and the multi-tenancy required some sort of isolation. And if you don't have the isolation between the multi-tenancy and the different customers, this means that users can read the data of each other. Although this is not easy, but it can happen. But how we can split the information, how we can allow the users to access this information without reading the information of each other. There are a lot of scenarios which you can do it here. By consider zoning to have a different zone, then this means that if you are hosting your data, then you can have a dedicated zone, and this zone, it will be protected by firewalls or next generation firewalls. The access controls, it can have, for example, the 2FA, a lot of other models, but the most important thing which you have to take it in your consideration, and my advice, you have to understand it very, very, very well, the encryption and how does it work. My friends, if you are working in the security field and you don't understand the encryption and how does it work and how you can evaluate it and all this stuff, I'm really sorry to tell you that you have a point of weakness which it cannot be mitigated. You have to work very hard to understand the encryption because it's a backbone in a lot of security issues. And as we mentioned that in the encryption, we have the type of encryption depend upon the states of the data, Then if you have the data stored on disk, storage, desktop, whatever it is, then this means that, for example, you can use the IPsec. If you have the data, it's in transient, where it is moved from one location to another through internet or through local network, then you have to use encryption. But the encryption here, it will not be IPsec. It can be a form of SSL or TLS. Also, we highlight some points last session, and we explained that the encryption, it has an algorithm and key. And it's very important to know how to handle the key management. This key management, it is very important, and it's the backbone of the data security. Because if the hacker he was able to get the key, then this means that he will be able to read all your data. The keys, generating the key, storing the key, using the key, share the key, and all this stuff is very important. Of course, encryption, it is I don't want to say it's complicated, but it's a long topic, and we will have some sessions related with encryption and cryptography, and this it will be in the next few months. In 2021, we will have some courses for encryption and cryptography. But I want you to think about it, first of all, that you have some algorithms. There is something called symmetric and asymmetric, and which one it will be more valuable for you. The key management and all this stuff, these are mandatory information you have to understand. We have some challenges with the encryption. From your experience, what are the challenges which you may face during encryption or from encryption? Any answer?
Encryption key might be getting lost.
Okay. If encryption key getting lost or leaked, this could be a problem. Private key or shared key. Okay. What else? Mainly, the main challenges here, especially in the cloud service provider for using the encryption, be related to performance. And bandwidth. Why? Because encrypting and decrypting, it will add some packets to the traffic. And this usually about 10% or 15% over the packet size. Then this means that you have additional packets over the bandwidth. And this means that it will decrease the actual bandwidth by 10%. The second issue, the processor and memory utilization. Now you have in virtualization, you are renting memory portion and processor, 2 or 3 processors. This, it will not be dedicated 100% for your application. This, it will be part of it utilized for the encryption and decryption process. And here, encryption and decryption process, it will add additional cost because, as we know, in the cloud, we have pay as you use or pay as you go. Then when you will increase the processing and the memory usage, then this means that you have to pay more money. When the encryption here, it will do more cost and less in the performance. Although it's very important in some situation, as we mentioned, it would be very important because it will be considered as isolation from other tenants, and at the same time, it will protect your data from leakage. But even if it will affect the performance, but by the end of the day, this will for your benefit. The other concept, the hashing. What is hashing? What is hashing used for?
Integrity?
Yes, hashing, it's used for integrity. That's right. What is integrity?
The data is never modified during the transit or in the receiver end, like whatever be the data, if A is transmitted, A is what it is received. And you can validate it that A is only received using the hash function.
Okay. To be more accurate in the definition, we want to say that the data, it will be only changed by authorized users. Because we are allowing data to be changed. We are enabling business. We are not stopping business. When you are able to change data. For example, if you want to make an order from Amazon for some certification books, and after you make the order, you discover that you need one more book, then you press escape and you add one book in your shopping cart and all this stuff, it's acceptable because you are authorized to do it. You are the owner of the account and you have the permission to do whatever you want. But in the case, if it's a hacker, then we are not allowing him to do it. How the hashing it works, this is a topic which is somehow complicated, but let me give you a quick idea how it's working. You will take the data by using some process. You will create a hash or you will create a code. This code, it's a fixed length. It depends. It may be 128 or bytes or whatever. And the popular hashing techniques are SHA and MD5. MD5, it's old one and it's vulnerable. Then you can use the SHA, for example. It will create this hash. The hash, it will be sent with the data to the user, by the user to the recipient. When the recipient, he will receive the information, he will calculate the hash based on the information which he received. Then you will compare the two hashes. If they are matching, then the data does not change it. If it's not, then this means the data changes. Of course, this is a very basic concept, because now if we take in our consideration a lot of security, we'll say, okay, the hacker, he can take the data, change it and change the hash. Then this means that you will not be able to send the hash. You have to encrypt the hash. You have to sign the hash. And this should be signed by the public key. We have other concepts which it should be taken in consideration as well. But as we mentioned, that this is not our area here to discuss. This we will have a different course for it. But just keep it in your mind, these points. This will be very important. If you want to understand the hashing, you will find a lot of information over the internet, or you can just wait until we announce our course for the cryptography. The other concepts for the data security, the key management. And this we discuss this in more details. We can key management for data encryption, and this is again a very important issue, especially if you have a public and a private keys. Then this means that you have to create a public-private key pair for each user or each system. You have to publish the private key over CA. This CA, it can be private as Microsoft CA, and it can be hosted in your organization, or it can be an international CA as Baltimore or VeriSign or whatever the CA available in the market. Tokenization. I think we will cover the tokenization item. Tokenization. What is the tokenization? Tokenization is some sort of data protection. You know, when you are enter your credit card number to any website to purchase something, and you want to see the number, we will never give you the number as a full 16 letter. We will give you some dots and the final 4 letters. Then this is a very simple way of the tokenization, that this tokenization, it will hide or change some of the characters of the data when it will not be detected or it will not be captured, as we are doing in the case of the credit card numbers. DLB, data loss prevention. In the data loss prevention, we have multiple components. And when you are working with DLP solutions, you will find it depends upon the nature of the type of the solution. For example, if you have a semantic DLP solution, for example, you will find some different components. One component for email, where it will monitor the emails and it will not allow any external email for confidential data, of course, or whatever any rule which you will define. It will monitor the network traffic. It will monitor the internet browsing. It will monitor the desktop usage, and it will not allow any data to be exported from the company or move outside the company if it's classified as critical or confidential or whatever. Of course, all these settings, it's defined, and these are policies. You can define that data, it can be logged or can be dropped, or this activity which someone has tried to do it, it will be forwarded to the security administrator, when they can take the appropriate action based on the security policy. The DLP data states, as we mentioned that with data, we have three different states: data at rest, data in transient, and data in use. Also, if you have a data loss prevention solution, it should deal with all these data types. When you have some DLP components or software or agents, it will be installed on the desktops or on the servers. If you have data transient over the network, when you have some DLP components, which it will monitor the network traffic. And if you have data in use where the application uses it or a system, as for example, a database, it's used by a specific application, then again, you must have a DLP agent to protect this data from being leaked outside the company. Of course, what we are discussing now, all of them related to the data security, which you have to keep in your consideration. If you are evaluating cloud service provider, or if you want to know if the cloud service provider providing these types of security or not, as we mentioned, the encryption, the hashing, key management. And as Pankaj, he asked question in the first session today about the key the components which it should reside or prefer to be reside in the customer side, and we highlight the key management, it should be reside in the customer side. Also, tokenization. If you have some information which is critical and you don't want this information to be leaked, then you can tokenize this information by hiding some characters or change these characters. And later, when you want this information back, you will be able to retrieve this data and reverse the tokenization process, when you will be able to read it. Also, you have to protect the data loss prevention. I mean, protect the data against the data loss prevention. Okay. Data de-identification, we will cover this later. Application of technologies. This is important point, and from my experience, I found that usually the emerging technologies, it will be considered as risks. Why? Because now, you know, if we have new technology, yani currently in the current time, we have AI, we have machine learning, AI, which is artificial intelligence, of course, machine learning, ML, we have digital transformations, DT. All these are new emerging technologies, and all the different fields, we want to utilize these services because it provides more functionality and features for the applications, users, and it will be considered as a great adding value for the application and services and increase its market share, of course, in the market. But although these are providing a lot of features which are considered valuable for the customer, but again, they are emerging technologies. We are still new to the market, and security people, we are not popular and familiar with these technologies. When you find that there are some risks which it will come to the picture if you implement these features or technologies, and it will create a really big problem for the application or the service. And this is the reason why we are saying this is the rule of the risk management in the organization. Because in your organization, if you have a proper governance, and this governance which is built on a proper risk management, and risk management is a part of the organization processes and daily operations, when you are implementing a new technology or a new emerging technology, then this means that you have to take in your consideration the risk assessment. You have to make a risk assessment for these technologies. What are the possible risks, how to be mitigated, and so on. We are not saying no, we will not process or use any emerging technology, because by the end of the day, what we are saying, security, it's an enabler for the operation. It's enabler for operation. It's not constraints for the operations. Then we have to provide them the solution. We have to make the risk assessment. We have to mention all the risks which we may face, and we have to provide the features for these assessments as for these risks as well. These are the data security strategies and things which you have to think about it very carefully regarding the cloud data hosting. The part 2 in this module is the data protection. And in the data protection, it has some rules and concepts which we have to work together. First thing, implement the data discovery. This is very important, my friends, that in your infrastructure, especially if you have huge number of applications and data, and your organization is enterprise size, then you'll have a lot of data, and your data, it may reach up to 100 terabytes. And in some situation, I know some organizations, the incremental data per year, it's around 5 terabytes. Then imagine what is the original data size. You must have some sort that you will be able to discover the data, because you will not be able to find out the data, especially in a cloud service provider. In a cloud service provider, just I want you to imagine that this cloud service provider, he have the main data center, let's say in one location, maybe in USA, for example, whatever, and he may have other locations, and the data is going back and forth between the multiple data centers, because he is replicating the data in all the data centers. Then he will be able to fail over the services if one of the data centers is down. When your data is spread across multiple data centers, across multiple storage devices, and these storage devices may be reside in different countries, then you must have a way for discovering the data, when you will be able to utilize it. And why do we want to discover the data? First of all, I want to discover the data to know where is its location, to utilize it in my operations, to get the benefit out of it, of course. And the most important issue as well, to provide the proper security controls for it. Data discovery is very important. Data is very important because, as we will highlight here, the classification. Data classification is very important, my friends. We have to keep this in our mind. If you have some data, do you remember the example which I explained day before yesterday when I told you usually when we are trying to explain to our customers what is the benefit of cloud hosting and what are the features. Usually we are trying to make life easy and give them some simple explanation. Usually I am asking my customer, what is the size of your data in my documents, in your personal PC? They will say 1 GB, 2 GB, 10 GB, 100 GB, whatever. Let's say one of them, he mentioned it's 10 GB. I tell him, wow, this is great. Then this means that you have to provide storage 10 GB, you have to provide backup, you have to provide anti-virus software, you have to provide redundancy because if the hard disk is effective or crashed or the PC, it's down. This means that you will not be able to reach to your data when you have to provide data availability in the form of external hard disk or whatever, right? He say, yes, right, we are right. I tell him, but this it's 10G, it makes some headache, especially you want to make a backup and every day you want to, if you get some changes, you have to update the external hard disks and so on. Then this it will be a problem for 10 GB. Just imagine if your data is only 1 GB, life it will be easier and it may be less expensive because by increasing the storage, then the cost of the backup increase, cost of external devices increase, and so on. Then, what's your opinion? Do you think that the 10G data, all of them are critical? They'll say no, of course not. Then, what is the size of the critical data? You will say, okay, it may be about 1, 2 GB. Okay, great. Why? Because of these 2 GB, we have the by financial status, Excel sheets. I have my business contracts. I have my customers' information. Also, I have my family pictures and so on. And these are private, and I don't want anyone to have a look on it. I tell him, aha, okay, then you have some sort of classification. Yes, I have a classification, but it's very simple. It may be private and not private. As I mentioned, the information of my customers, private, the pictures, private, Excel sheet for my financial situation and calculation, private, whatever any others, it's non-private. Okay, and this it will be great. I tell him, then what do you think? Can we take the non-private data and copy it to the cloud and let the cloud service provider to be responsible for the backup, for antivirus, for availability and all this stuff, and you will be able to manage only 3 GB or 2 GB, which is private data. Look here, although this example is very simple, but it has the same concept for organizations. The only difference here that the organization, it have to define a data classification. And this data classification, it will not be only private and non-private. It will be more complicated. In some situation, you will find be classified as general business usage or in internal usage, private, confidential, critical, and of course we will have some characteristics for each one of them. And this classification, it will depend upon what? Upon the impact of this data, if it's leaked or if the CIA of this data is affected, the confidentiality, integrity, and availability. How it will affect the organization from point of view of financial, point of view of laws and regulation, point of view of financial loss, point of view of legal fines, and so on. Then if all these factors, it will have high impact on the organization. When the data classification, it will be considered high. It may reach up to the critical, but if it's normal data, which it can be published over the internet or whatever, then you can consider it as business usage, and this it will be public because of this it can be even published over the internet and the user it can be utilized. In this case, this is the reason why we are caring about the data discovery. We will care about the data discovery because I want to know where is my location, or I want to know the location of the data, then I will be able to provide the proper classification. And of course, when you will provide the proper classification, you will be able to provide the controls or the appropriate controls for your data. Okay. Jurisdictional data protection. This concept, my friends, it's very, very important. Very important. I want this to be in your mind. You will hear about this many times during the cloud evaluation and the cloud service provider evaluation. Why? As we mentioned, cloud service provider, especially the enterprise cloud service provider as AWS, as Google, as whatever the name, just name it, we don't have a single data center. We have multiple, and I don't want to say, and for example, AWS, I remember one day I attend an architecture training course for AWS, and we mentioned we have 54 or something like that data centers. And you will find that each data center, it will be in a different location. It will be in a different location. Some of them, it will be in United States. Some others may be in America. I mean in Europe. Some others in maybe Middle East and so on. What we mean by jurisdictional location, that each location of this data center, we have to follow the laws and regulation of this area. For example, if I have a data center based in Europe, then this is very important to take in my consideration the GDPR law. And if it's based in USA, then I have to apply NIST SB 800 or 54-800 or whatever. There may be some other privacy laws. For example, in America, we have to protecting the financial financial information. Yes, we have the SOX. If you want to protect the health information, we have to apply HIPAA. If we want to protect the financial transactions using the credit cards, we have to apply PCI DSS and so on. And this, it will be very important to understand the location of the data center and the jurisdiction, because in some situation, for example, if you have a data and this data it's hosted in Middle East, and this data, it's for some reason the Middle East data center, it will be closed for maintenance, and all the data and users, it will be migrated or fed over into another site in what we call Europe, for example. Now there is a big difference in the jurisdictional areas. It has their own rules. Europe will have their own rules. We have GDPR, we have the European Union standards and so on. Saudi Arabia, we have different standards which is follow, for example, the NCA, National Cybersecurity Agency. Authority, NCA, National Cybersecurity Authority. When this means that we have two different set of laws and regulations. In some situations, there may be some contradiction between these laws. For example, some laws, it will say that you have to keep the data as retention period for 5 years. Some others, they are saying, no, 3 years, it will be enough, for example. Then this is very important. You have to understand the jurisdictional data protection. And the most important thing to understand the data protection rules for your country. For your country as well. Okay, roles and responsibilities. Roles and responsibilities, I don't want to go through this in details because it's very clear. What is the roles and responsibilities related to data protection? Security people, we have to provide the risk management, we have to provide the proper security controls, the operations team, we have to provide the proper processes for managing the security controls, monitoring and measurement team, we have to measure the performance of the cloud service providers and the bandwidth utilization and the data protection and all this stuff. This it will be very clear, and especially if you want to work with the roles and responsibilities, of course, ISO 27001, it will cover this in detail about the roles and responsibilities and what are the roles for the cloud, for the data protection, and what are their responsibilities as well. Classifications of discovered sensitive data, we spoke about this, mapping and definition of controls. Of course, this is an important issue because, of course, in the data protection, you will have your own security controls. There is one point here, my friends, which I want to highlight and I want you to understand. When we are saying you have to define a definition of controls, do you think as a customer or cloud customer, you want to implement your own controls to protect your data, or you will depend upon the controls provided by the cloud service provider? In other words, do you think that as a security team of any organization, you have to work to define some controls for data protection, or you would say this is not my responsibility, this is the responsibility of the cloud service provider, and the data it's reside in his side, and he have to provide this information for this protection for us? What do you think? Any answer? Anyone is still alive?
Yes, we are live. We are live.
Okay. Of course, it depends upon your requirements and, of course, upon the risk assessment, which you will do it for hosting the data in the cloud service provider. You can utilize both. You can depend upon the controls of the cloud service providers, and you can implement your own security controls as well. Because by the end of the day, what you are renting from the cloud service provider, it's a data center. But it's a data center in the cloud. It's a remote data center. But again, it's a group of servers, storage, so on and so. Then if you have your SIM solution, you can install this SIM solution in the cloud service provider and configure all your application in the cloud service environment to send the logs to the SIM. If you have your antivirus, you can rent a server and configure it, and this it can be utilized for checking the or scanning the servers by agents and so on. Then whatever any controls which you do it in the traditional data centers, you can have the same concept in your cloud infrastructure. Of course, live, it will be more difficult because the integration, it will not be easy because you don't have a full control on the infrastructure, cloud service provider infrastructure. But again, you will be able to arrange with him, and you have to clarify everything in your service level agreement that we want to have our SIM solution, we want to have our antivirus or anti-malware, or we may have IPS, or we want to have, for example, I want to rent 5 separate zones, and each zones. If it want to speak to each other, we have to pass through a firewall and so on. And of course, just when we say firewall or any device like that in security, we does not mean it's a real device. It's not a firewall as a real firewall, a box which has some interfaces and so on. But now what all the brand names of the firewall, we are providing the firewalls as an image. Then what you have to do that you have to rent the server VM, install the image on this VM. Congratulations, you have a firewall. Even it's Cisco, it's FortiGate, it's whatever we name. There are a lot of firewalls which are popular in the market. Okay, the application of defined controls, we discussed this. Data rights management, yes, DRM, or in some situation it will be IRM, information rights management. But data rights management, this it's related for the data, and this usually data rights management, it will be used for the data which it will not be under your control. It will not be hosted in your network. For example, I have my file. Okay, I have an Excel sheet. This Excel sheet, it has a list of the salaries of all the security teams and members of my department. This document considered confidential, and it will have a lot of protection in my organization. For example, that it should be encrypted while it's stored. If it moved over the network in transient, then this means that it should be encrypted using TLS. It should be reside on the internal zone of the network. It's not allowed to be outside the company or to be transferred outside the company premises. Anyone who wants to access this file, he should be connected to the physical network internally. Even remote access it will not be allowed, and so on. Then I can have a lot of security controls over this document. But now in our situation, my friends, we are a cloud service provider. And the data, it's not hosted by my infrastructure. It's hosted outside my organization. Then how can I protect it? Or if in my organization, for some reasons, I was forced to send this document to maybe our holding company, our main company, because the holding company, we want to have a look on the salaries and evaluate the salaries as HR, for example, and the holding company, it's not reside on the same physical network. It's a different company, maybe in a different city or even different country. When you want this file to be transferred to remote location, then in this case, how you will provide the protection for your data if it's outside your organization? What do you think? Any answers?
Any agreement or something?
Okay.
MOU, signature of an MOU.
Sorry?
Any MOU signed between the two organizations.
Okay, but the service level agreement, it will be great, but this I can consider it as it's not a preventive control, because even if you have a service level agreement or you have NDA, non-disclosure agreement, and there is one employee, disgruntled employee, or even a hacker who was able to penetrate the holding company network, they will be able to open the file. When even if we have the NDA, but the NDA it will not prevent. The NDA by the end of the day to protect you against any problem with the regulation, to prove that you did the what we can say, the due diligence. But here, let's say that we can encrypt the file, Okay, great. If I'll encrypt the file and I'll send it to the holding company, this it will be great, but I protect the file till it reach to their network. But when it will reach to their network, what will happen? We have to decrypt it to open it. Then if we open it, it's done. Then here it will come the data rights management. Data rights management, it will be a part of the file metadata characteristics. You have to define that this file, it can be read, can be write, can be print, it can be changed, it can be erased, it can be deleted, and so on. Then you have to define the who can do what permission on these files. Then, if I, for example, say that this file, it should be only read, because why do you need write? You don't need it. You want to know what is the salary value of the stuff. Then I gave permission for financial department to read the data. And I send the file. Then if anyone from the operations team or maybe marketing team, they try to open it, it will say, no, you are not authorized. This file, you are not authorized to open it. Then in this situation, you will not be able to open the file. The only people they will be able to open the file, it will be the financial department. And even if the financial department try to make any changes, it will tell them, no, you are not authorized to do these changes. You have only a read permission. Then you will not be able to make any changes. This, which we call it data rights management, DRM. Any questions?
How DRM works in real-time environment?
Yes, of course. Of course. It depends, because this means that it should have in background, we check the usernames and password and all these things, and what is the permission. Then, of course, it should work in real time, and there are some applications which is use the cloud service. Then when you open the file, then immediately it will call the cloud service and it will check the permissions and so on. There are other services which it will be able to run on-prem. Then through internet, it will communicate to your server in your organization and check if it's cloud or not. Okay. The last part in this module, it will be security concepts related to cloud computing. We mentioned, here in this course, we will cover general the security concepts related to IT security, and then we will go in more details about the security concepts. The most important issue for the security concepts, which you have to take it in your consideration during the cloud service provider evaluation, or even in your data center, the retention, deletion, and archiving. This is very important, retention period, how long the data it should stay in your organization. I know some organizations, they may have their data since they installed the application. This is not a good thing, because this means that you will have, after 5 years, 10 years, huge size of data, and this it will be a headache for the operations, for backup, for protection, for encryption, for a lot of things. And this means that this is not the outstanding solution, and the outstanding solution that your data, live data, it should be available in your system for 1 or 2 years maximum, and you can utilize this data in form of archiving. What is the difference between the normal data and archiving? That the normal data, it will be stored on the application server itself, but the archive, it may be on a cost-effective solution, and it will take some time till the application, it will be able to retrieve the data from the archive. It takes some time, but this, it will not be an issue, because this data, as we mentioned, the archive, it will be older than 2 years, and of course, not all the users, you will need to access this data frequently. It will be only for checking some important issues. Also, you have to understand how the cloud service provider, he will be able to delete this data, and how, as we mentioned before, we have three different types of deleting the data, and we explained this day before yesterday. But anyway, let's summarize it very quickly. As we mentioned that you can crash the hard disk, then the hard disk, it will not be usable. No one will be able to access the hard disk. The second option, that you can encrypt the data, and this the outstanding solution, that you can encrypt the data and you can spoil the key, encryption key. And the third one, it is the data overwriting, and we mentioned that there are some standards. We define that you have to override the data with some specific patterns for 2 or 3 different times. When the original data, it will not be able to be retrieved. The data archiving concept, as we mentioned, that this it will be very important. You have to keep an archiving solutions. Usually now in the market, you have 2 types of archiving solutions, one for structured data and another one for unstructured data, or which we call it the structured and unstructured objects. It may be individual Word files, Excel files, video, audio, whatever. Legal hold, I will not go through this legal hold here, because this legal hold is mainly for the America and Europe. But for traceability, accountability, and auditability, as we mentioned, it's very important that you have an audit for the cloud service provider and for your data. You have to be able to trace this data, because tracing the data is very important. You have to know its location. You have to provide the proper security controls for this data. And you have, again, to know who is accountable for this data, who is responsible for this data. By the way, the data accountability, it is the responsibility of the data owner. It's the responsibility of the data owner. The data owner is responsible for managing the data, to provide the controls, to protect the data, and define who is authorized, allowed to access the data. Okay, we finished this module.